On a cold November night in 2009, a young father crawled into a cave with a smile on his face and excitement in his heart. He had no idea that the narrow tunnel ahead of him would become his final resting place. What started as a simple adventure with his brother would turn into one of the most heartbreaking survival stories in modern history. Deep beneath the ground, in total darkness, surrounded by solid rock, he would spend his last hours fighting for air, fighting for hope, and waiting for a rescue that almost succeeded, but not quite. This is the story of how a man got trapped forever inside Nutty Putty Cave, and how one small wrong turn changed everything. The cave sat quietly near the shores of Utah Lake, not far from Salt Lake City. On the surface, it didn't look like something that could swallow a life, but underground, it was a twisting maze of tight passages, sharp turns, and spaces so narrow that only the slimmest bodies could squeeze through. The cave was known as Nutty Putty Cave, famous among thrill seekers for its challenging design. It wasn't a wide, open cavern with tall ceilings. It was a claustrophobic puzzle of rock, formed over thousands of years by hydrothermal activity. Discovered in 1960 by Dale Green, the cave quickly became a popular spot for young adventurers. Every year, thousands of people applied for permits to explore it. The entrance was only about 30 inches wide. That alone should have been a warning, but for many, it was a test of courage. If you could navigate Nutty Putty, you proved something to yourself. Over the years, there had been close calls. People had gotten stuck before. Some had been trapped for hours before rescue teams managed to pull them out. In the early 2000s, concerns about safety grew louder. There were incidents where inexperienced explorers underestimated how tight and dangerous the passages truly were. At one point, the cave was temporarily closed because officials feared it was only a matter of time before something tragic happened. But after new rules were introduced and permits became required, the cave reopened. Adventurers were warned. Only those with some experience were encouraged to enter. On paper, everything seemed controlled. And then came November 24, 2009. John Edward Jones was 26 years old, a medical student, a husband, a father of a baby daughter. He wasn't reckless, he wasn't careless. He was simply adventurous and curious. Growing up, he had explored caves before. It was something he loved doing with family. When he and his brother Josh decided to visit Nutty Putty Cave over Thanksgiving break, it felt like a nostalgic trip, a chance to relive childhood excitement. That evening, around 8 p.m., John entered the cave with Josh and several friends. At first, everything went smoothly. They explored some of the larger chambers, laughing and talking as they moved deeper underground. The air was cool, the rock walls were damp. Headlamps cut thin beams of light through the darkness. But here's the twist. Adventure often hides its danger behind excitement. After about an hour, John and Josh decided to explore a part of the cave known as the birth canal. It was one of the tightest sections, famous for being extremely narrow. Only a few experienced cavers attempted it. The name alone suggested how small it was. You had to crawl on your stomach, inch by inch, barely able to turn your head. John volunteered to go first. As he crawled forward, he believed he was entering the birth canal. But in the darkness, with similar-looking tunnels branching off in different directions, he made a small but critical mistake. He took a wrong turn. Instead of heading into the known passage, he entered an unmapped section called Ed's Push, a far tighter and more dangerous route. At first, he didn't realize the error. The tunnel narrowed quickly. It sloped downward at a sharp angle. John continued forward, thinking it would open up soon. He assumed there would be space to turn around ahead. There wasn't. The passage became so tight that his chest was pressed against the rock. His hips barely fit. Still, he kept inching forward. Below him, he noticed a small opening and believed it might allow him to turn around. But when he slid down into it, everything changed. The space was only about 10 by 18 inches, roughly the size of a washing machine opening. John slipped headfirst into the hole, and suddenly he was stuck. His arms were pinned beneath his chest. His body was angled downward at nearly 70 degrees. His head was lower than his feet. And worst of all, there was no room to move. At first, he tried to stay calm. He attempted to shift his weight. He tried to push against the rock. Nothing worked. The more he struggled, the deeper he slid. The rock walls gripped him like a vice. He called out for Josh. When Josh reached him, he could only see his brother's legs sticking out of the narrow hole. At first, it seemed almost unreal. They had joked about tight squeezes before. But when Josh tried to pull John's legs, he realized the truth. John wasn't just wedged. He was trapped. Josh pulled again, harder this time. John slid a few inches, but in the wrong direction. He went deeper. That was the moment panic set in. Josh knew they needed professional help, but there was no phone signal deep inside the cave. He had to crawl all the way back to the surface. It took time, precious time, to reach emergency services. By the time rescue teams arrived, hours had passed. The first rescuer to reach John was a woman named Susie Matola. She squeezed through the tight passages, maneuvering carefully until she reached the trapped man. She spoke calmly, trying to reassure him. She attempted to free him by loosening the rock around him. At one point, she even cut parts of his clothing to create just a little more space. But the cave would not release him. The situation grew more serious as doctors explained a terrifying reality. Being upside down for too long can be deadly. The human body isn't built to remain inverted for extended periods. The heart must work much harder to pump blood upward against gravity. Organs begin to fail. Breathing becomes strained. John had already been trapped for hours. Rescue teams developed a plan using ropes and pulleys. They drilled anchors into the rock to create a mechanical advantage system. The idea was simple in theory. Attach ropes to John's legs and carefully pull him upward.
In practice, it was incredibly dangerous. The space was so tight that only one rescuer could work at a time. Rocks crumbled during drilling. Small pieces fell near John's body. Every movement had to be precise. Above ground, more than 100 people waited anxiously. His wife, Emily, stood outside, hoping, praying. Inside the cave, John remained conscious. He spoke to rescuers. At one point, they set up a communication line so he could talk to his wife. Hearing her voice helped him calm down. For a moment, hope returned. After nearly 19 hours, the pulley system was ready. Rescuers began pulling. Slowly, inch by inch, John's body moved upward. For the first time since he got stuck, his face became visible to a rescuer. His eyes were red. His face showed exhaustion, but also relief. He believed he was about to be saved. They were so close. But what nobody expected was how fragile the setup truly was. Suddenly, one of the pulley anchors failed. It ripped from the rock. In an instant, the rope lost tension. John's body slid back down into the narrow hole, deeper than before. The sound echoed through the cave. Rescuers froze. The progress of nearly an entire day was undone in seconds. This time, John did not respond as clearly. His body had endured too much. The strain of hanging upside down for so long had taken its toll. Rescuers attempted to reach him again. They tried drilling around him to widen the space, but the rock was unstable, and every attempt risked a collapse. Hours later, a paramedic was sent down to check for a pulse. There wasn't one. On November 25, 2009, shortly before midnight, John Edward Jones was pronounced dead inside Nutty Putty Cave. He had been trapped for nearly 28 hours. Above ground, Emily struggled to accept the news. She was pregnant with their second child at the time. She had believed, even at the end, that her husband would walk out of that cave. Plans were discussed to retrieve his body, but the risks were too high. The same narrow tunnel that trapped him made recovery almost impossible. Eventually, officials made a painful decision. John's body would remain inside the cave. The entrance to Nutty Putty Cave was permanently sealed with concrete. It became his final resting place. Today, the cave is closed forever. A plaque near the site honors John's memory. His story continues to serve as a reminder of how quickly adventure can turn into tragedy. The emotional impact of that night stretched far beyond the cave walls. His parents lost a son. His brother carried the weight of witnessing the accident. His wife raised their children with stories about the father who loved exploring, who smiled easily, who never imagined his last family trip would end underground. People still debate what could have been done differently. Some say the cave should have remained closed. Others believe it was simply a tragic accident, one wrong turn in the dark. But here's what stays with you the most. John wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't trying to break a record. He was just a young man revisiting a childhood passion. One small decision, one narrow passage, one moment of misjudgment, and a life was gone. When you think about it, caves are silent witnesses. They don't warn you. They don't forgive mistakes. They simply exist, dark, tight, and indifferent. Nutty Putty Cave still sits beneath the Utah ground, but no one will ever crawl through its passages again. Some say the scariest part of the story isn't the darkness or the tight space. It's how close the rescue came to succeeding. For a brief moment, he could see the way out. For a brief moment, everyone believed he would survive. And then, just like that, hope slipped away. John Edward Jones entered the cave as an adventurer. He never came back out. And deep underground, surrounded by unmovable stone, his story remains, a quiet, permanent reminder that even the smallest twist in the path can change everything forever.